All right. The last presentation we left off with talking about, you know, people don't really convert to Hinduism. They have to be born through reincarnation into Hinduism. Let's talk for a little bit about the texts, the Vedic texts of Hinduism, just to give us some background on them as well. There are two basic periods of the Vedic text, uh, the Vedic period and then the philosophic period. Vedic going from 1500 BC to 500 BC, the philosophic basically from 500 BC to AD 500. The term Vedas itself just simply means knowledge. So these are sources of knowledge. But for Hinduism, you can divide it into four sacred groups of scriptures, and often includes what's called the Upanishads and their commentaries. But all of these are just, called in general Hindu writings or Hindu sacred scripture or sacred writings. And they view them as being written by various holy men over the centuries, handed down in their writings. Here's some examples of some Vedic text, and you can see they're illustrated as well as they talk about the mythology and things like that that make up the stories, some of the stories, or as the case may be, if they're text about various magic or incantations, or it could be poetry of some kind as well. So the Vedic period, starting in 1500 BC, this is the Aryans when they were immigrating into this area. They were speaking what we call Sanskrit. So these early ones are written in Sanskrit. They would call what is called the Rig Veda, literally knowledge enshrined in verses is the idea here. And so this was the earliest writings in Sanskrit. And this is the oldest collection, this Rig Veda. It's about 1028 prayerful Sanskrit hymns or poems, and they're often addressed to the various devas or gods, different gods. Devas, it just means shining ones. It's interesting, we call a lot of our pop stars divas these days, but these shining ones who dwell on earth and the heavens and intermediate air. So they can be any of those locations, according to the Rig Veda. Like the Greeks, we're probably more familiar with the Greek mythology. If you think about Greek mythology and the way the gods and goddesses were, they didn't get along. They fought with each other. They manipulate humans. They really didn't care about the human welfare so much. But it was like a celestial soap opera that, like we have soap operas on TV today. And so, but like the Greeks, there was the practice of ancestor worship, but worship of nature gods and these divas. And the divas were invested with personal attributes, superhuman powers, dwelling in various heavenly or celestial places. You have what's called Shruti, which means that which is heard. This is distinguished from later writers called Smriti, that which is remembered, also considered by some as authoritative. So some consider it less sacred and non-Vedic, but you got these, you can see that they look at their own texts and say, well, this is more divine, or it should be more important than other texts that they have. You basically have your Vedic text divided into 4 collections, and for this dividing it this way is complicated, but at the same time, it's the only way you can hardly deal with the text. So basically, you're saying here's what's in these collections. You got the Samhitas, which date back to 1500 to 900 BC. And this is basically a collection of hymns, or what we would call poetry, sort of like we have Psalms in the Bible. It's poetry, but it could also be sung and so forth. You got the Brahmanas, 850 BC. This one deals with the caste system. So you can see the idea of the caste system goes back quite a ways. You got the Aranyakas. These are later parts of the Brahmanas as well, dealing with caste. And then more into the philosophical period, 500 BC, you got the Upanishads. And so you can see these are not as old as the other parts, but it's a lot of philosophical stuff and talking about Brahman, Atman, the soul, Maya, what is the world is made up of Maya, illusion, we would translate it. Yoga, the practice of yoga, disciplining yourself so you can achieve moksha, release from cycle of samsara. Nirvana, and basically talking about a lot of it would give us an idea of the world view, of how they view the world in these 4 parts of the Vedic text. So keep those in mind. You've got what's called the Yajur Veda, and worship. It comes from that idea. Yeah, this is mostly in prose, meant to supply dedication, prayer, and prayers and litanies. So it's liturgy, we would say, in Christian perspective, often recited by the priests in course of their duties of sacrifice. So this is your Yajur Veda, it's part of your Veda system. And then Samaveda, meaning song, Sam meaning song. These are chants for worship by priests, and they all come from the Rig Veda. So notice that these sacred writings, these Vedas, come from different parts. These, like the Yajur, the Veda, the Sam Veda, they're dependent on the Rig Veda, the broader scriptures. You have the Tharva Veda, which carries the idea of the priest of fire who brought from heaven this sacrificial system. In this, you'll find charms, incantations, spells, oftentimes considered inferior and more associated with folk religion, but that depends on which perspective of the various Hindu beliefs systems are utilize it. All right, so origin of the Hindu culture and religion. Over time, the sacrificial system developed to compel the gods to grant appropriate rewards. And you can remember when we talked about polytheism, how gods were viewed, that you had to kind of coerce them or implore them through sacrifice to do what you wanted to do. They're not there just to do what's good for you, like God is in the Bible. So the Brahmins, that's priests. So I'll give you a list of how to understand the different terms: Brahmins, Brahman, Brahmana, and all those as we go along here. But this one's priests alone knew how to offer sacrifices right and extract the favor of the gods. So they took that position in that. Did I start the recording? Does anybody know? I can't even remember.
Yes.
You did. I see it.
Okay, good. I thought I should see it up here, but not seeing it. All right, and then you got as Aryans came in, they kept the distinctions between themselves and the darker skinned indigenous population. And these became known as the Sudras or serfs. Uh, and uh, and they themselves were the Vidya, or what's called means twice born, and we'll explain that as we go along. But uh, this dichotomy based on skin color was brought in with the Aryans as they came in and colonized the northern part of India, and which was mainly made up of indigenous people that were darker skinned. And this will become the source of the caste system, by the way. Oh, there it is. Varna, meaning color, distinction between races, source of the caste system. And so, because the caste system is so ingrained in India, it's good to understand the source of it, where it came from, and why it came into being. And that's one of the reasons why Christianity has always tried to, when it works in India, to break down the caste system. Very difficult, very hard to do, but you have churches in the India that have broken it down in the sense that people from every caste are worshiping together and, you know, treating each other as equals. And so that caste system doesn't exist. But the minute they walk out the door, they're living in a world that still is full of the caste system. And it hasn't changed the overall culture of the caste system yet. So the caste system based on dharma, that's your religious duty. So if you are among the Sudra, the serfs and things, we'll talk more about, they have multiple castes to all the way to the, the untouchables on to others who do some of the most nasty of the manual labor. Um, each person is born into a caste or community. You don't have a choice. You can't choose your caste. You can't, decide I'm going to work my way up to this caste. You can't, you don't do that. You only get changed caste by doing your duty in your current caste, building up good karma. And then when you die and reborn, you may move up a caste. Of course, if you didn't do so well, you can move down as well. So each person within this caste has their duty to do for their community. So, if you're in a caste that you take care of the trash of everybody else, that's what you do, and you're supposed to do it well. And each of these castes will have gods or goddesses of their own. And so oftentimes you'll find a particular god or goddess is associated with this group of people, this community of the caste. Oftentimes it's the caste, and then there's subgroups under it, communities under it, and they may each have their own special god or god that oversees them. Caste system is a preservation of their social and ceremonial purity. So we have to understand that the caste system is not only based on color, but it's based on purity as well, which begs the question, of course. So the darker skin originally meant more impure than the lighter skin. And it's quite possible that's the way they viewed it. That's kind of lost in history. But it could be part of the originality of the original part of caste. So in the caste system, for the Aryans as they came in, they had the top four castes, or and the first three were the twice born castes, they're called. And these Kshatriyas, these were the warriors and princes. These were the ones who ruled the country, the communities of that time. They were sort of like principalities, like we're in Europe. Then you had the Brahmins. This would be the priests and instructors. And then you have the Vaishyas. These are the agriculturalists and merchants. These are ones who had the farms and the stores. They ran the economic system of the time, and then you had the Shudras, the workers. But these top three here, these were the twice born. The workers are serfs, and there's hundreds of subcastes called jati. And so we have to realize that in this section, there's just hundreds of different levels of the caste down there, all the way down to the untouchables. Now let's talk about the twice born first here. They because of their highest in the caste, they have all the participation in Hindu culture that's available. They're not limited like you would be once you're in, if you're in the Shudra thing level. And they can study the Vedas. They have certain puberty initiations, and they take the leadership roles in the overarching Hinduism political and economic system. The Aryans, they were the ones who controlled the study of the Vedas until recently anyway. You know, not just anybody could study the Vedas. I think this is breaking down some. They brought in all of India under the control of this Aryans, and they kind of assimilated the beliefs of the indigenous people with the Aryan beliefs. And so the idea is, you know, did the idea of reincarnation, was that with the indigenous people originally, or did it come with the Aryans? And I don't think there's a consensus among scholars on where that came from. Here's a good illustration here of castes. You have down here, these would be the impure castes. These are called the Dalits or untouchables. The Dalits means the oppressed ones. This is your everything from street sweepers to people who take care of the public toilets. Anybody ever see the movie Slumdog Millionaire? That's an interesting movie, very worth seeing. You see a lot of culture in it, but you see the problem with Dalits and the problem that these people take care of the dead bodies, and be a lot of this will be where the outcasts are. Here up here at the top, these top three are your Aryan twice born, and you know, we could take this further. The gods and goddesses are up here. So realize this whole caste system goes all the way up to the gods and goddesses who go through the reincarnation as well. And at the top, of course, you have the Brahmin priests, and then you got your kings and rulers, and then craftsmen here. And then you got your common workers and servants, but then the break is with the untouchables. And if you look at of all the people, the billion in India, 200 million, 1/5 basically, fall in the Dalits category. You know, it's actually 1.3 billion, but you know, it's a lot of people that fall into the Dalits category, and they cannot move up into any of these other castes until they die. And if their karma lets them, they may move up according to this system. And so we need to realize just how strong the caste system is there. And you know, in the U.S., for example, we may be born into a poor family. My dad was, you know, he was born into an extremely poor family, sharecroppers, and I mean, they had all the hardships that were there, and oftentimes went without food and things. You know, more my mom, her dad was a skilled laborer, carpenter, and did some farming. They had enough land to have some farming, and they didn't go without, but they, they suffered when the depression came and things, but not like my dad's side. But he could work his way up. I mean, and by the time he was in his 40s, he was in the middle class, and most of his brothers and sisters. He was the second oldest of 20, so he had a lot of brothers and sisters, and but they, all of them, would have been classed mainly in the middle class by the time I knew them very well. But you can't do that in this system. All right, so let's talk here. Brahmins, priests, until recently had sole custody of the Vedas. They've allowed people to come in and study them more than just keeping them to themselves. So here's where I'm going to tell you about the different Brahmins. So keep this one in mind, because you want to keep it straight in the exam. Brahman is the impersonal pantheistic God. This is the this is sort of like the Force in Star Wars. If you're familiar with Star Wars, let the Force be with you. Well, there's this pantheistic force that covers the world and all of the cosmos, and eventually, if you get released from the cycle of samsara, you get absorbed into that. But it's not personal. There's no personal God. This is just some impersonal entity called Brahman. Then there's Brahma, the personal creator God that we talked about earlier. Then there's Brahmin, the priests and priestly castes. So keep those separate. It's easy for people to confuse Brahman with Brahmin. And then the Brahmanas, priestly commentaries on the Vedas. And so you want to be sure to keep those clear in your mind. And remember that on the website on Canvas, there's a Hindu terminology list. Just like on the last exam, there will be terminology. And because you can't understand a religion without understanding their terminology and being familiar with it. All right, now, Cordovan, the book you're doing a summary on, has this chart in his that I'm noting here, and he's pointing out that there was originally a one God, original supreme God, called the Sky God, Dias Pitar, and but as time went by, the polytheism came in, and so you get this list here of different gods where they turn the earth, Mother Earth, into a goddess there, and then there's Indra here, the king of gods, sort of like Zeus. Mitra, which is similar to, and is probably pretty much the same god as Mithra in Roman times and in biblical times of the early church. Sun god. The Roman soldiers were known to really, Mithra was kind of their favorite god. Rita, god of truth and right. Vishnu, we looked at earlier a bit, the sun god, later called the preserver. And then Rudra, this is a kind of a capricious mountain god, later known as Shiva. Remember, these gods now are going through reincarnation. So you have Rudra, but through reincarnation later is Shiva. And then Agni, god of fire. Soma, the god of drink and immortality. That's where that Soma they drink, the priests drink. And Brahman Shpati, spoken word, was gaining significance So a lot of variety in Hinduism. All right, that's where we'll stop this one recording, and let me pause this. Stop sharing. Stop.